technology that has been around for several decades, has been making headways into multiple industries for the last decade, has remained on the periphery for a while, but has finally been able to have a value that it can deliver to business aside from having a cool technology around that works wirelessly. So I'm going to talk about medical applications of RFID today. I realize that not everyone here in the room is involved in a hospital or a medical treatment facility, but many of the things that we're going to discuss are applicable whether it's medical assets, real assets, property, or information technology assets. Once I figure out the right button to push, which that was not yet, we're going to be on the road. There. I heard that no successful presentation ever starts without technical hiccups, so I've got mine out of the way on the first slide. Good. Okay, so we're going to talk about tracking issues in healthcare delivery. This is a presentation about RFIDs. We're going to discuss why to automate those, why there's a benefit to automate tracking. We're going to get into a little bit about RFID 101, what it is, some examples of how it's actually used, and then specific to healthcare delivery, the advent of, and really good presentations have two technical questions. So, specific uses of real-time location systems, and then how it's actually employed, frameworks for employment, what you'll see is RFID gets employed. So in healthcare delivery, there are multiple different things that have to be tracked. So on a typical shift in a typical hospital, the nurse is tracking patients, beds, medical equipment, doctors, anesthesiologists, samples, medication, and quite frequently they're doing this, in most cases, very well with manual systems or from the top of their head. It works very well in isolated instances, and most of the time it's fine, it's sufficient for what they need. But when we have Mrs. Jones in a hospital bed with a ventilator or an IV drip attached to it, then we need to keep track of not only the patient, the bed, the equipment that she's attached, as it transits through various processes in the treatment facility, various rooms, locations, through medical maintenance, have that equipment, that bed, that location, and that person associated with tests and prescriptions, high-value supplies, physician preference items. These issues become more than a single person can track, more than a manual system can efficiently keep track of, and we start to see where even good tracking at the nurse or at the station, on the floor, at the local level, doesn't provide the efficiencies and the benefits that we want to see throughout an enterprise or throughout a facility. So RFID is one way that we can automate this tracking, not only to make the actual workload of the people who are doing this less so they can focus on patient care or health care, an example, but so we can start to get some enterprise level efficiencies, get the business intelligence from the asset tracking that we need to make enterprise level business decisions. So why automate asset? Why automate asset tracking? Well, for healthcare delivery, there's a few main reasons that we would automate it, particularly with RFID. First, for healthcare, it's about improving patient outcomes. It's about increasing patient safety and increasing the rate of positive outcomes from medical procedures. RFID can automate many of the patient safety checks that are involved. It can reduce patient wait time, help with infection control. There's some cases where it can help with tracking of contaminated materials such as globally. It's also about improving hospital efficiency. It's about improving the efficiency of the workflows, of the processes, of the management of assets at hospitals or where individual geographic locations, businesses are involved with. RFID can automate the workflows. It can allow the IT systems and the tracking systems to take care of tasks that would otherwise be accomplished manually. There was a study done a few years back that for every week, a nurse will spend 1 to 2 of her 40-hour shifts looking for equipment. That's time that can be better spent on patient care, and in the aggregate, that is more efficient operations that an enterprise can run. RFID is about reducing costs. Yes, there are implementation costs up front, but in the end, it's about reducing inventory and for high-dollar supplies, improving the utilization rate of those assets that we're relying on to deliver patient care or whatever the business is delivering. It's about automating tracking of shrinking and automating tracking of shrinking and materials with an expiration date to reduce the amount of material that has to be discarded because it's past its expiration date. So our RFID can reduce our data entry errors here. Can automate tracking of high-value, high-dollar assets, and allow us to get the information we need to optimize our inventory levels and our reordering. All right, so what is RFID and how does it work? There are many different kinds of technologies that will go under the name of RFID. At its core, it's wireless exchange of information. What makes up an RFID system is a microchip with an antenna attached to it, and that's called a tag. There are many different kinds of this, and we'll talk about some of the most common. But a microchip and an RFID tag uses the antenna to communicate wirelessly with a reader or an interrogator. On its own, this really doesn't do much. It's only when we pair it with an IT system or a back-end system that it becomes an RFID system where assets can actually be tracked and the information. So the most common types of RFID, active RFID has a battery associated with the tag. That increases the tag's range. It increases the tag's memory. It also increases the tag's cost. But in an active RFID system, the microchip and the tag is attached to the battery, and that handles the wireless transmission of information. There's a few different kinds of active tags. Wi-Fi tags are common in hospital settings where they have existing Wi-Fi networks, and they can use a Wi-Fi tag to track their assets. Various radio frequencies are used for Wi-Fi tags. And then many tags are starting to use the new Bluetooth Low Energy protocol because they can have extended battery life, good data transmission rate, and it's also compatible with Bluetooth on cell phones and commercial mobile devices. Passive tag is the cheapest kind of RFID tag. In a passive tag, the microchip uses energy harvested from the antenna, from the signal, to power the tag and power the memory. Passive tags will have a lower memory. It's usually just a serial number to identify that RFID tag from all other RFID tags, and then a few check digits. But they are cheaper, and data rates are slower since they have to harvest the energy to run the microchip. High frequency, ultra high frequency are the most common kinds of these, but also the near-field communication tags that you'll see in retail apparel and some other places in marketing use passive. There's a few other kinds of tags associated with these. Because we have a microchip, we can attach things to it, such as temperature sensors, environmental monitoring sensors. Those run off batteries, and battery-assisted passive is a passive tag. It's not constantly transmitting. It's only replying when we want to read the temperature that the tag has been monitoring. A few other niche applications in healthcare, infrared and ultrasonic are two examples where, for various reasons, they don't want a lot of radio waves, radio interference. So from this, a couple of benefits that RFID has over manual tracking and over barcodes. It doesn't require line of sight. There have been studies done on retail apparel inventory where stock clerks with a barcode scanner We'll scan and scan and scan and scan and scan and take inventory, and then I'll pay attention and miss a couple scans and go back and scan and scan and scan. Now, admittedly, that's still better than a pencil and clipboard that may only get done occasionally. But with RFID, you take that last little bit of human error out of it. And an RFID reader can read all the tags in its range in a matter of seconds. They can store a much larger amount of data than barcodes. So where a barcode, even a two-dimensional barcode, can store a larger amount of data, RFID tags can store, for active tags, entire bills of lading, shipping documents within there. And the memory can also be changed as tags go through processes as data is updated. So it is not for every application, and it does have its drawbacks. The first one is the higher implementation cost. I'm not going to get the hang of it. First one is higher implementation cost. The second is it uses radio waves, and radio waves don't go through metal that well. Now, this has long been a technical hurdle of RFID tags. And I'll say that for the most part, it has been on a technical basis overcome. Specifically designed to be placed on metal surfaces. They are more expensive than other tags, and they're still not perfect. But high metal environments are no longer a technical showstopper as they were in years past. RFID tags can be relatively expensive for for feature-rich tags. So for the most simple passive tag, 7 to 12 cents per tag for large volume applications. But for active tags, basic active tags from 10 to 35, and then when we begin adding sensors and batteries, it can go up into the $50 to $100 range, and then even more as we begin adding more radios, tags with cellular radios or satellite radios used for tracking things over a long distance can get over $100. As can tags with sensors attached. One of the things that we'll talk about later is that the tags can get more expensive on an individual basis. But it's important to look at what they're used for and look at it in aggregate of how much is the enterprise going to save. All right, so what are some actual applications of using RFID? Well, we talked about a few different areas that hospitals have to track before. One of the first ones is tracking beds. So the story goes, and versions of this are fairly common as hospitals have implemented RFID systems. We're going to put tags on our 100 hospital beds. I set a time for all the hospital beds to be gathered so I could put the tags on, and 175 hospital beds showed up. Being able to track something as common as hospital beds does a couple things just from knowing where they're at. So one is being able to find something. But it becomes more powerful when you link the tracking information to other business processes. When a hospital bed leaves a patient's room for the last time on discharge, to automatically trigger the cleanup and sterilization team, reduces the time to turn a hospital room, increases the hospital's overall profitability because their rooms are available more of the time. Medical equipment. So tags on medical devices is one of the first applications that many hospitals pursue. One, it reduces the time that it takes to find a medical device. So and it reduces hoarding. So the situation where everybody has a defibrillator stashed in their hospital floor because they need to find one because it's really important when they need one, or the other one is locked up under lock and key and the person's key on the other floor, it reduces this because we'll always know where it's at, and finding it's not such an issue. Again, it becomes more powerful when you link it to other processes. So when we can track the bed that Mrs. Jones is in, linked to the equipment that goes with her in that bed, as they transit through processes in the hospital, we can begin to trigger other things like maintenance, like billing. People. So putting RFID tags on people is a very sensitive subject, more so in the United States than other parts of the world, but it's still very sensitive. What hospitals have done, not really to get around this, but many hospitals have and have to have a duress notification system, a way where if a medical professional is in duress, they can signal that they need help. And the easy way they do this is tracking effect is to give someone an RFID tag with a button on it. That's the duress button. So if they push that button, the duress system will know wherever they're at any given time.
Jonathan, I hate to interrupt you. Whoever, a reminder to please mute your line because we can hear you in this room. Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
No problem. So tags don't just come with one button, they come with three. So what are you going to do with the other two buttons? Well, if you've given somebody a tag, they'll figure out a very good way to use it. So they'll do this to tags on people can also be used to trigger processes. So if I'm in a certain room and I activate my tag, that can be used to summon maintenance. It can be used to summon if I'm an anesthesiologist and I need more anesthesiologists to come help me, not necessarily an emergency. It can be used to summon all other anesthesiologists that are on the same floor. Patient location. So another kind of common RFID application that is used at the start of larger RFID deployment is tracking patient location. So again, a sensitive topic when we attach tags to people. Most of what industry's found is a lot of it is in the way that you approach it. So if I'm going to give you a tag that I can use to track you to optimize my workflow, there's probably going to be a lot of resistance. But if I give you a tag that can let you know, dynamically updated, what your wait time is in the emergency room, allow you to locate your family members, allow you to know how long you're going to wait for a certain procedure that we've moved you for. It's providing you something that gives value to you, that makes your experience better through tracking you, but that's really not what the focus is. Patient elopement and instant safety are two main things. So getting into more of the supply aspects, tracking high-value medical supplies. There's some supplies that the dollar value of losing a single one of those, or in significant delays to realizing that you haven't lost it, but you've used it, is such that putting RFID tags on medical supplies is worth it sometimes. High value, high dollar physician preference items can be tagged, and whether it's putting readers on the rooms that they're located, the cabinets that they're stored in, or certain choke points that they transit through, will allow automation of reordering, updating of general ledgers and financial systems, or how much of these high dollar items facilities currently have on hand. RFID can be used for lower dollar medical supplies. An example of where it's used for things that don't justify the cost is to automate reordering in a two-bin Kanban system, or kind of track the containers that hold lower dollar medical supplies. There's a certain point that taking inventory of something is automatically losing money because those somethings are such low value. And in that case, RFID can automate the process. For medical facilities, specimens and prescriptions, Cath Lab is one of the first places that many hospitals implement it. And for the VA, which is implementing an enterprise-wide real-time location system, is one of the largest RFID implementations ever. Cath Lab is one of the first places that they're going with it. So RFID can do a couple of things aside from tracking the specimen, being able to get updates sooner to that. It can tie into other things. For specifically patient health records and electronic health records. For hospitals, and for facilities in general, the more systems more back-end systems that the RFID tags can feed into, the greater the value. Now, the more difficult it is to do, but when these tags going through certain choke points can automatically update a patient's electronic health record or a billing system, the greater value that we're able to get from it. All right, so for hospitals, they need to locate things much more frequently than many other facilities. And there's a certain, call it frequency, that organizations need to locate their assets. For hospitals, if they're tracking beds and defibrillators and other critical medical supplies, they need to locate it within a matter of minutes, many times. So as they put more sensors in, they'll develop what's called a real-time location system. Real-time location system is simply a facility that has enough RFID reader and tag coverage to locate tagged items in real time wherever they're at in the facility. These are some typical screenshots of what you would find in an RTLS implementation. A couple of things on this before we move on. RTLS system isn't cheap, and it is really rarely a positive ROI proposition aside from contained, localized facilities. Now, there's other tracking options for larger geographic footprint areas. So yard management and tracking trailers in a delivery yard, that can be done down to the actual location through ways other than implementing a real-time location system, or through a different way of implementing a real-time location system. For hospitals, this is generally achieved, the real-time location system is generally achieved when they put readers in every room or at specific checkpoints throughout the facility. Just everything that they track is tied to a business benefit. It's tied to a reason. We'll talk in a little bit about how to finding the right reason and starting small is essential to most organizations that have successfully got to this level. So for most kind of case study successful implementations of large-scale real-time location systems, large-scale RFID deployments, they did not start by going directly to the end-all be-all. They started with a simple, very compelling, small-scale business reason that helped people do their jobs better and also benefited the enterprise, and then built on that. So we've kind of talked about benefits to specific facilities and uses in specific facilities so far. RFID also has benefits throughout the supply chain. So for things going from manufacturer to the end user, we can track, trace, and identify it throughout the supply chain. There are cold chain applications to make sure that whether it's a certain vaccine that has to stay below a certain temperature, has remained below that certain temperature for the entire time, or that it's remained within the appropriate care and custody that it should have the whole time. Now, that's of some value to the end user, but the information that this generates and the information that the hospitals and medical treatment facilities generate are of great value further up the supply chain. So that the business intelligence and the tracking information the hospitals can generate are of tremendous value to the distribution networks and to know how they can optimize inventory levels and get closer to a just-in-time inventory system are of great value to the manufacturers so they can reduce their trunk stock, which is literally stock that sales reps keep in their trunks because they need that much safety stock to carry around with them. But the business intelligence that RFID generates can severely reduce or even eliminate that. All right, so how do we get there? And this is all great. And RFID is cool. And I told you at the start, I'll talk about this technology any day. But how do we get there in a way that makes this a smart investment of resources that will benefit our enterprise and not just something that schools play with, or also something that schools play with? So it starts with the business objectives. It starts with what we're trying to get out of it. It starts with what are the things that we're going to do. Whether it's pallet, bed, item, or case, it starts with figuring out what's going to be tracked. It needs to be based on some preliminary assessment. And this is anything from complete business analysis to back of the napkin math on whether having real-time information and automating the tracking of certain items will help our business out, will benefit us. In any framework, this is a technology, and good requirements management and having a good set of requirements is essential to actually getting what the organization wants out of it. Architecture and design, it is important to make sure it's actually used right. So the requirements in the architecture and design, some stories of failed implementations will have RFID portals set up on the facility, where they have essentially wasted their time and money because they're only tracking part of what comes in and out and not everything. So this extends beyond just the physical design and physical requirements. This is also into what happens with the data, what you do with the reads, and what you do with the process. As with many technologies, where processes are not very well defined or are not very well documented, there will be difficulty in implementations of technologies that will give you a very, because it's coded to the system, process to follow. It has to be integrated with other systems in order to begin to see enterprise value. So a lot of places that RFID implementations start, and this is not a bad thing, are isolated within geographies, within organizations, within departments. So for example, the head of IT at a single building has to periodically inventory his computers, laptops, phones, monitors, whatever, purchases some RFID tags and an RFID reader. Not integrated with his property system or any other system, but it saves him time doing his inventory. That gets adopted a few other places. And now what we've got is something that for those people that have implemented this, they're getting some value out of it. They're making their lives easier, which equates to less time, less cost to track their items. What organizations at the enterprise level will run into and have to be aware of is what is sprung up at one location and is providing them value, and what is sprung up at another location may not be compatible at all, so may not scale across the enterprise. May use different types of RFID tags, different standards, different data elements. It's not insurmountable, it just has to be addressed to be overcome. Integration is looking at how deeply we're going to have this integrate with the back-end system, the ERP, financial. They're going to provide a lot of value. Proof of concept is essential. So the proof of concept and starting small and scaling up, something we've talked about a little bit before. So with RFID, one, you have to make sure that the technology actually works for what you want it to do before you can scale up. But you also don't have to rebuy the infrastructure. So, for example, hospital starts off with using an RFID system to track the location of its bed. It either uses this existing Wi-Fi network, installs a few additional Wi-Fi sensors, and begins to track the location of its bed. Those same readers, that same infrastructure, can be used to track the location of ventilation machines at the cost of only a few additional tasks. So successful implementation in the beginning reduce the cost of further successful implementation. And this technology builds on the infrastructure of previous implementations. Proof of concepts are essential, and then phase deployment is important to manage the resources that go into this, but also there is a large element of change associated with this. We're changing the way people track things. We are, in some cases, taking their clipboard out of their hand and giving them a handheld scanner. Successful implementation built on the momentum of previous and smaller incremental deployment. To put it in very plain language, if you do it at one floor and that floor falls in love with how they don't have to search for an hour for a defibrillator, they will tell the next floor right above them, and you will have an easier time scaling it up. The opposite is also true. The first floor doesn't work, you have a tough time on the second floor. All right, so what will you actually see in an RFID deployment process? The very first thing is to analyze what it is you want to do. RFID should make sense where it's used. And, also, this is an RFID presentation. RFID doesn't always make sense. There's many cases that you won't ever be able to justify the ROI of having an RFID tag. You might not even need a wireless read, and barcode might make sense. Or changing your process without any automation might make sense. So analyze what it is you're going to do. Find the valid business reason for doing it. In listening to leaders in industry and companies that have successfully implemented this, whether it's on a local basis or it's something that they're scaling throughout their enterprise, they always start with reasons that make sense, scale to other business reasons that make sense, and as their RFID use keeps growing from business reason to business reason, it's based on ROI gains. It has to prove itself at each step along the way, and does when done successfully and in the right areas. So it starts with the analysis. The part of this is the technology fit assessment, and that's what we're talking about with, is RFID the right thing? What is the right RFID technology? And working through this, you'll look at how much memory do you need on your tag, what's the typical read range that you need, what makes sense and what is most affordable for me. This is the part where questions like, I already have a Wi-Fi network set up, can I build on that for my tracking, get answered. Supply chain security is a consideration in many of these deployments. There are organizations that RFID will never be a viable option for, simply because of the security considerations and its wireless transmission of information. Whatever the organization is, supply chain security can be considered. In healthcare, there are some other mandatory things from the FDA that impact on this. That RFID might not be a leading part of, but can be a consideration. And then proceeding on to the pilot design and the implementation. So as the deployment progresses, designing and implementing the pilot, and then rolling out. We touched on change management before. Successful implementations will have change management support throughout, and are very cognizant of how much they're requiring people to change the way they do. Also, say there's a theme among how successful large-scale implementations have approached kind of the individual person's perspective on change management. It's giving them something that's going to make their job easier, make them better at their job, and improve their ability to do it. So taking away somebody's manual Excel-based tracking system is going to be difficult if they then have to input that into 2 systems or 3 systems, or they can't do something that they did before. So they're most successful where it takes people less time, is easier, is not something that is that technical to learn, but from the individual person, the individual in the workforce's point of view, it lets them be better at their job, and it also benefits them. And then the integration and project management support. There is a technical aspect to this, and before RFID readers will be installed, the frequency, the resonance of a location will be set up, and before I put an RFID reader on the other side of that room, I'm going to stand here and make sure that I actually have the signal strength to read it. And that has to be managed right. So, that for many people looking at this technology for the first time, this is the process that we see most for people that in the end get to successful implementation. As with many technologies, there is certainly the opportunity to rush toward it, throw technology at a problem, and proceed forward before kind of the somewhat time-consuming early stages have been done. So I think that the key is often finding the right place to start and then the right place to go from there. So for large enterprises, and this is not healthcare specific, for large organizations that have successfully implemented RFID programs, major RFID programs, you'll see three elements. You'll see a senior executive sponsor. You'll see somebody that believes in the technology and is at a sufficient level to maintain momentum on it. You'll see dedicated someone within the organization, or depending on the size, groups within the organization that maintain dedicated, that stay dedicated to RFID implementation. And then you'll see that it takes time. So I'll use Airbus as an example, and they're an example that is cited a lot. Airbus is implementing real-time location systems in all of their manufacturing facilities worldwide. It's been a many-year journey for them to do this. And they started with a few plants, and they started small. So they started with tracking their tools, which is one of the more common early RFID implementation. From that, they had the infrastructure. They started to put RFID tags on the parts that flowed through their facilities. That worked, and then they expanded to other factories to begin to integrate it. They began to integrate the tags with their supply chain partners. So engines that Airbus receives have information about that engine, and they can identify it from whoever the engine manufacturer was. And in the end, they got to this place where they are now publicly announcing that they're going to do this throughout their enterprise because they're close enough there that they'll be able to do it. But they kind of have these three elements. It took a long time to get to the level that they're at. They had a dedicated team working on it for a long period of time, and they had several executive sponsors. Let me close with kind of saying that a lot of things we talked about were healthcare specific. A lot of them weren't, but some common threads that we see, whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, logistics and distribution, or retail apparel. It starts with picking, for RFID, it starts with selecting the area where it makes sense to do. Be small in terms of scope, scale, footprint, implementations, where it's a business case that will benefit the workforce, benefit the enterprise, and then building from there as the momentum builds and as the infrastructure gets built. With that, any questions?
I actually have a wristband from a festival that we used to check in. Would that include RFID because it would track where we were at, what stages, and things like that?
Yeah.
It would be passive though, correct? Because it's not affected.
Yeah, and if you look at it, all of the passive tags, you'll be able to see with a microchip.
Yeah, I can see it around.
Yep, that's the antenna, and then kind of a little small grain of sand in there is your microchip. For RFID, in the RFID industry, it's growing at different rates in different areas. the place that's growing the most is in retail apparel. And here's the reason why. So if I'm a retailer, I've got a rack of jeans. I have one size 12 and that's it. I take inventory once a week. The day after I take inventory, somebody buys that one size of jeans or steals it, and I don't notice for another week. Everyone else that comes in there to buy that same size of jeans is a missed sale because I don't have that stock. With RFID, and I don't have the stock because it costs me money to take inventory. With RFID, I can take inventory every night or every hour or more if I want to, and immediately restock that jeans. Retail apparel, we'll see 3 to 5% sales. At the volume they're doing. The second largest area is in healthcare because for hospitals, what larger hospitals have found is that the benefits they can get from increasing the utilization of their assets, tracking their assets and kind of optimizing how much assets they have versus how much they need, will have a 1 to 3 year payback for the investment. Kind of marketing is another area where it's growing. I think as much as that industry is and is not cohesive and fragmented. Conference passes, wristbands like that, some of the easy pass example, the easy pass that you use on the toilet, that's an RFID tag. And
it was connected to social media, so it would upload things automatically. So I guess that would be an element of advertisement for them.
And there are business parallels to that. So if that was a business and it was connected to different modules in your ERP system, you could take supply chain, asset management, financial action.
So bosses don't start issuing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it is kind of sensitive, and I think there's very few cases that I've heard of that it is a pure, we're going to track you with this tag case. They probably did track you with that tag, but they did it by allowing you to automatically update social media. Sometimes for tool tracking, it's not necessarily the mechanic or the worker that's tracked, it's the toolbox that's always done. And with retail, if you have a smartphone, unless you're turning off almost everything in it, anytime you go into a retail location, they're tracking which shelves the door is staying on that. Your movements are being fed to the database. So, yeah. It's usually where there's kind of, we're getting a tag strategy, but we let you upload to social media. And that's not just for tracking people. That's kind of for tracking anything. Getting somebody, designing and building in the incentive to use the tracking in the system.
My son owns business, and his trucks are tracked. He can go on the computer and know where his trucks are.
And they, most of them are in the States. So most large, virtually all large commercial carriers track. They can probably do the same monitor their speed, make sure they're not speeding. And his insurance company is going to give him a little bit better rate for that, to make sure that they're not speeding. He can feed that into a computer program that will tell his drivers the most optimal route to lower his fuel costs. There is a lot of RFID applications for the trailers. It's in the yard, instead of kind of without RFID, I have a yard of 200 trailers to change out every week. I'm going to spend hours or a day looking for one particular trailer.
What about classified environment?
So,
You can't talk about it, right?
I'm working on a project with Health right now. I've done some projects before. Most of them have looked at RFID at some point over the last 10 years. Some of them, most of them don't use it for the same thing as the commercial industry would. So the Army has, including the Army, or the DoD has experimented with a passive tag that doesn't automatically provide a return. Passive tag, as long as you're pinging it on the right frequency, and there's only a handful of frequencies to choose from, it's going to give you a response. There's many times that certain governments don't want any response provided. There's still going to be a risk to that. So I think there's a lot of uses, even within a building or within a compound, for things that don't ever leave. And the electronic emissions aren't so much of a concern. For every passive tag, there is embedded by the manufacturer a unique identification. In order to spoof this, you have to be very technically savvy. In order to make a tag that can spoof it, you have to be able to make your own microchip. Not impossible to make a fake tag. It's just very difficult unless you have a microchip factory in your backyard. And there is a lot of times that if I can wirelessly acquire 100 microchip IDs from a passive tag in a certain building, that doesn't tell me anything. So there's still uses within a building. There's also uses for things that you want to make sure that never leave a building. So again, not perfect because tags have policies. Does that really work?
Well, that's crazy. I can think of those little things, but I didn't know it really worked. But.
Well, I don't know. I've got a foil hat in my car. It does.
Wow.
You know, but a lot of times things are either too big to wrap in foil, or the tag is in a location that is so difficult to get to. And it's kind of like that. You can only go so far, and then if somebody really wants to do something, you're probably not going to be able to stop them from doing a lot of things. But there's a lot of things that can be tagged and then alerts automatically issued if it leaves a certain location. With whether there are sensors in every room, which quite often, honestly, is not needed, or just a specific choke point to be able to tell if things are going in and out of the facility. You can still tag certain things to make sure they don't go. Tagging file holders is becoming pretty common in the legal industry, so they can find a legal file. Medical offices that haven't gone to electronic health records can also do this. The technology is also progressing where they can now place RFID tags into injection molded plastic. So if you have the lid of your laptop as plastic, there can be a tag made into that. Your bracelet is probably an example of how that's not glued together. They just made it the tag inside. And so, you know, it's not getting the right requirements far enough back. Probably not too many places that would be. So I think that classified world, there's, I would say any classified environment, if you're looking at automating tracking, RFID is one thing we can look at. Barcode is another. There's a lot of, generally, organizations, whether it's classified or not, can improve their processes significantly just by looking at the processes, taking a actual look at the data as a discipline, from mapping data management, data architecture, and everything else, looking at data, seeing what they can do with what's happening already in boards, and then what can be done with part of it. If you look at the Supply Chain Council and Association of Operation Management, Supply Chain Operation Reference Model, using RFID and automatic identification is a leading practice, or emerging practice for them, but it's never on its own. It's always in addition to something. So in addition to using advanced shipment notices, I can use automatic identification to make my process better. And I can
We've run out of time.
Not here.
I just got one quick question. What's the longevity of this? Have they, I know at one point there was a couple of years, have they been able to get the life of those RFPs or longer than the past?
Yeah, so passive tags, don't have a theoretical limit. I think what the technology's been able to do, there's a couple places the technology has got to the point of diminishing returns. So I was one. By the time you get tags smaller than a grain of rice, not much more benefit getting it smaller than half a grain of rice. And longevity is the other. So in most cases, the tag will last longer than the life cycle of the item, and that's what we want. Where they've gone instead is harsh environments. So developing tags that can survive in higher heat, which would previously fry tags. For active tags, because it depends on how often you want them to transplant and the strength you want them to. For most applications, they'll go at least a year in their active tags, and that's enough. A year is enough to change that. Really, the industry, you can track anything, and we are.
I mean, she mentioned on break that every marathon runner has the RFID on their shoe as they're running the course. Walmart is basically creating a cart that you pull things off the shelf, updating the retail. It's putting the cost of what's on your cart right on your handle. You never take anything out. You swipe your card when you go through. Yeah. And a lot of those people that are arguing with me in track are the ones that are on the social media every day saying I'm here, I'm here. I have all my services turned off. I'm a paranoid one. But
It's probably going to match some tinfoil hats. I like the
and it's still room. But I don't want anybody to run that. And I think it's much good in as many applications as there is available. There's always, the folks that are looking to do. And we ship a lot of, tracking to the TMS system. And there's a lot of shipments that we don't want people to be able to take a look at because we don't want them to know, A, where it's going, B, what's in it. And I can, when she said security, I can just tell you in our world, if it's got a digital, aspect to it, it doesn't come in the building. Or it's locked in the car. So I think we're ways from utilizing security. Hey, the guy from IBM said, who wants a computer in their house, right? And now look where it is. So I could be wrong 20 years from now, and I'll be fine with that. But.
Well, the thing is, Walmart's using it, everybody's using it, and if you're not watching for those tags, then we'll make those. Yeah. And frequently organizations aren't. And that's kind of, easily we can set up reader in the door, see what's coming in, or what's going out if you don't want to, but you're going to have a lot of tags.
Law enforcement too.
Great. Thank you so very much.
Yeah.